Welcome to Running Tales with Craig Lewis on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network by Run, Try, Bike. I am stepping in today for Craig, who is away on a well-deserved holiday. My name is Jason Bahamundi, and I'm going to do my best to live up to his high standards. Today, I'm going to be chatting with Brittany Vermeer, who crossed the finish line of her first triathlon in 2019. Since that day, she has been hooked on the sport. Triathlon isn't just about swimming, cycling, and running for her, but it is a way of life. The sport allows her to connect with the outdoors, join a community of like-minded individuals, and discover that she is far more capable than she thought she was. Beyond being a triathlete, Brittany is also a journalist, freelance consultant, and regular contributor to Triathlete magazine, Outside Run, Ironman, Xterra, and many other publications. Before we bring Brittany on the show, please remember to subscribe, rate, review, and if you're using Spotify, comment on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. There are 9 shows to choose from with various stories and hosts, so I'm sure you'll be able to find one or all of them to your liking. So without any further delay, let's bring Brittany in from the back room and chat with her about her days in triathlon, her writing, and everything in between. Hey, Brittany, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am fantastic. On one of our other shows, the Fireside Chat, we start with an icebreaker question, which typically has to do with pineapple on pizza. But instead of asking you that question, I'm going to ask you a question that is more in line with Craig and Running Tales, which is, what would be the song that you chose as a walk-up song at your next race? I'm
Oh,
a huge
goodness.
baseball fan, and Craig is a huge music fan, so we've combined the two.
So this would actually be a much better question for my husband. We were riding the bike trainer this morning, and you can definitely tell the intensity of the workout based on the playlist that he chooses. Um, I tend to be, oddly enough, a little bit more like 80s rock, and I don't know why because I was born in the 80s. But yeah, so I mean, always there's good choices. Like you can have Eminem or Neo or kind of those. But yeah, I can't pick a specific one, but definitely like 80s genre.
That works. So you laughed about the pineapple on pizza. What would be your voice? What would be your choice? Excuse me, then.
Oh, pineapple definitely. And pineapple. It's great. I don't know why anyone wouldn't like that.
It's a good thing this is Craig's show. Otherwise, we'd turn it off right now. As a native New Yorker, pineapple on pizza is not a thing
Oh
that
yeah.
we do. We
I'm
have.
from Florida, so
So I want to get into the conversation about triathlon. I myself am, I don't know if I would call myself retired triathlete, but it's been a number of years since I've participated. But you crossed the finish line, your first triathlon in 2019. What was the catalyst that got you into the sport? What was the thing that you were like, you know what, swimming, cycling, and running all on the same day for miles on end sounds like a blast. Let's get into it.
So actually, I was an athlete growing up. I mean, I think like most kids were, t-ball and soccer and golf and karate, like you do, cheerleading. I did everything. The one thing that stuck when I got older, and I did for actually 13 years, was I showed horses competitively. So equestrian. And after that was through college, and actually I had a lot of success. Not people a lot of people know in triathlon because I don't really talk about it, but I have 10 world championship titles in equestrian competition. So you get to the very top of a sport and you become really great at something, and then you graduate from college, and then you don't have a lot of financial assistance anymore, and so then at that point you enter the real world. You have to get a job, and it's a very expensive sport. So after that, I've been an athlete my entire life, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? And going to the gym was fine, but I've always trained for something, right? I've trained with a purpose, for a competition, for a goal. And a friend of mine has suggested starting running, and I could not run when I started from mailbox to mailbox. Like I was absolutely a beginner, and started doing a couple little trail runs, like 5Ks around town. And she invited me to a triathlon club meeting. And that's how I learned. I had no idea what triathlon was. And after going to a couple meetings, we have a good local triathlon group here in Tallahassee. And um, that's how it got started. They had my first triathlon was a super sprint. So little baby distance. I think I was like way too prepared for that because I was training with people who had, done
Right.
like Ironman and stuff, but I got a lot of great guidance. So it ended up being a great first experience. And I was like, okay, I got it. This is, and I think triathlon is something that you can do throughout your whole life. You can
Yeah.
start it when you're much younger. You can do it when you're 80 years old. Like it's a competitive outlet for a lot of people who are, not in college anymore. And a lot of times that gets lost because there aren't opportunities for same thing with running.
Yep.
It's just a competitive outlet for people to train and stay healthy and have fun.
How quickly did you cross the finish line to pressing register on the next event?
Oh, I remember I crossed the finish line. My coach actually, she at the time she refused to coach me. She's like, "We're just gonna help you a little bit, see if you like this." And I crossed the finish line. I'm like, "Okay, can you coach me now? I want to do this." And so that was 2019. So in that time period, progression everyone does, like sprints, Olympics, and then I believe I've done 7 half Ironman and then 2 full. Our last one was Ironman Arizona in November. So
Oh,
not that long ago, actually,
no, not
when
long
you
ago
think about it.
at all.
But that was my husband's first, so it was a fun
Oh,
experience to get to do it together.
that's awesome. I raced
Yeah.
Ironman Arizona in 2012 myself.
Okay.
Um, so I have experience. I don't. I think the everything is still the same from back then. So you swam in Tempe Town Lake.
Hmm.
Did you ride the bike up and down the beeline?
Yes.
Three loops.
Yep.
Yep. And then I think the run for us is different than the run that you do now, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember being at Ironman Arizona a few years ago, and I know the run course is different today than it was then, but it's all fairly the
Yeah, it
same
it
area.
runs around the lake. We
Yeah.
go up into Papago Park, back
Yep.
over bridges, and that was a really cool part because you got to do loops.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people don't I like a looped course because it helps you break it down mentally, right? You're not
Yep.
thinking, I have 26.2 miles. You're like, oh, we'll do this loop, and then this is
Yep.
this bridge. I got to do this bridge 2 more times, and that's what helps me.
I want to go back to 2019 really quick. So, what was out of the three sports? What was the one that you thought to yourself, "I've got this," and then what was the one sport when you were done with that first sprint triathlon that you were like, "Yeah, I probably need to work on that a little bit more."
So growing up in Florida, I lived in Florida my whole life, and then Texas in college, and back to Florida. So I've always swam, like scuba dived and stuff, but I did not know how to freestyle swim. So I definitely got swim lessons before. That's kind of been my thing. I'm a pretty good swimmer. Um, I enjoy the bike, the run. I mean, I started triathlon when I started running.
Okay.
So I had no background. So the run is definitely, and throughout my, career up until now, the run is definitely a love hate kind of thing for me. We're working on it, but
So you raced with your husband at Ironman Arizona in 2024. What did you guys train together as well?
yeah,
What was
yeah.
that
So,
experience like?
well, I did my first one at Ironman Florida the year before,
Okay.
and he's a couple years behind me in triathlon training, and so we wanted to make sure he was ready because I feel like that's a big thing. You can't do an Ironman for anyone else. It's a
Mhm.
big, commitment. You have to have a reason why you want to do it. And so he decided the next year that was he's like, okay, I want to. I am not going back to Florida because he's like, I don't want to swim in the ocean. That is his thing. He does not like. But so we picked Arizona, and yeah, it's challenging having one athlete in a family training for an Ironman because the other one has to pick up a lot of slack. I mean, if we don't have kids yet, but if you have kids, with we both work full-time jobs. He's a doctor. So you have to balance training and life, and having two athletes training for an Ironman at the same time in the same household, you definitely have to get outside support. With just I think some days my mom would come over and like bring us dinner. She's like, "Here, I want you guys to have some food." But I mean, it's amazing because I have someone who likes to do what I do. So
Yeah.
we go on long bike rides together. And although we are not the same pace, he's a lot
Mhm.
faster than me. You make it work, and it's fun that you can be out there together.
Yeah.
And I mean, I spend, you know, 24 hours a day with the person that I love, and we get to do what we love to do. So it was amazing, and I was so proud of him because he did, I mean, great for his first one. So
It, when he crossed the finish line, was he like, okay, I'm ready to do another one now? Or was it more of like
no,
a, woo, let's wait and
no,
then
he
we'll
was
go
like,
back?
I'm not sure I like that. He's more of a shorter, faster distance kind of
Okay.
guy. He does like he likes the 70.3 and
Yeah.
he likes Olympics. And I do think he will do another one. I find that people either go one or two ways when they cross an Ironman finish line. They're like, I absolutely will never do that again. That was horrible, or I can't wait to do another one again. And it's weird, which I guess it depends also on how the race went.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
that's why we kind of have a rule in our household. We don't make a decision on the next race until about 3 weeks after, at least.
Yeah.
No decisions on, because it takes so long to come down from those
Hmm.
things, and your body's under adrenaline and you make bad decisions. So 3 weeks moratorium on, do not sign up for something. You can think about it, but you don't press the button until you actually have like come down off that high and like are a little more rational. And
Well, we're 4 months past that race, 5 months past that race now. So
uh,
have you made a decision? You're past your 3 week mark. Have you made a
oh
decision?
yeah,
What's next?
we're getting ready to race in a couple weeks.
Oh,
We took a good, and this was important, like 3 weeks off after the
yeah.
race, just doing whatever we wanted to do, easy. We went on vacation, and then we did off season, and then training. We have 70.3 Gulf Coast,
Oh, awesome.
and 4 weeks, I think. So this is a half Ironman year. So we have 3 half Ironman we're doing this year,
Gulf Coast,
taking
and
a break from the full.
what are the other two beyond Gulf Coast?
Augusta, North Carolina.
Okay. So you talk about taking a break and 3 weeks off and all of these other components, working, training with your husband and living with him, obviously, and going through that process. Part of me, as you're giving us these stories, makes me wonder if your time as a journalist with Triathlete Magazine, Ironman, Xterra, you've learned a few things along the way from some of these other athletes. Is would that be a correct assumption that you've heard these stories from the athletes you've been talking to and have been able to implement them into your training and racing concepts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I did from the very beginning was I got a coach, and I had very good coaches, a husband and wife team, and so I learned how you were supposed to do things the right way from the very beginning. And I think that's a part that a lot of people miss because they think, oh, I'm not super fast, I don't need a coach, or I'm not a professional athlete, I don't need a coach. And the people who need coaches are the people who have to balance a full-time job with training and kids, and the people who want to reach a goal and aren't exactly sure how to do it. And it just takes the guesswork out of it because you're given what you need to do and follow plan. And there are some coaches that are better than others at that. So you have to figure out what works for you. But that was a big part of it. And then also, yeah, I mean, I get to interview like pro triathletes and the top coaches in the world and Olympians and runners. And so I kind of get to pick their brain. I always have this thing where I'm like, this is the topic of the article, and we're going to talk about it and answer all the questions. And then we're done. And now I get to ask you my questions. So a lot of times I'll be like, so what do you think about tapering? Completely different topic. And I'm just, I'm curious. So I like to gather information. I like learning.
What's
So,
what's your take on taper? I love
oh,
hearing.
I mean, a lot of people don't like taper, and I would say that's probably my experience. It kind of sucks. I tend to feel everything during, that everything starts to hurt and I get kind of sluggish, and you can get cranky and sick, and I don't particularly like taper at all. I know it's necessary, but I would be perfectly happy just like going right on through to the race. Every taper has not felt awesome for me, but that's my body, I
I
guess.
think this is one of the things about the sports that we all participate in is that we are all individuals. Like I am absolutely craving taper. By the time I get
Uh,
there, I just want to take naps for the whole entire day. Like I just want to lay
yeah.
there and rot on the couch or in the bed. and be done with it. Like I've poured myself into the training.
Yeah.
And then there are people who are like, if I can train straight into race day and go, like, let's do it. And I think that's a great lesson for anybody listening to this show or when they watch it on YouTube is you have to do the things that are best for you, and not what some influencer on Instagram or TikTok is saying is the only way to do things. I think you have to figure out what works best for me. And a lot of it is trial and error. So my question to you is like, what are some of the things that you've tried and you're like, this just does not work for me. I need to do it this way instead. And you have found better results.
I mean, specifically, if we're talking about taper, I have learned everyone has a different type of, body makeup and everything. So, like I said, my husband's definitely more those fast twitch muscle fibers. He's a short, fast guy. Um, he is currently working on his endurance. I'm kind of the opposite. I'm not real great at that high power, real fast. I can go forever at like a moderate pace. So that's why I like the longer distance stuff. And I have learned that when it gets to taper, I have to do a little more during taper week than most people, just because he calls me a diesel engine. I take a while to warm up. And so some people just need a little bit more mileage during that time period. And I'm definitely one of those people. I will feel better. Otherwise, I go into race day and will feel dull and sluggish. So yeah, it's kind of like I talk about this on the blog, taking the best practices, what, you know, history, experience, science shows you to be true. And then you kind of have to modify it to fit you and what you know about your body. Cause I think you are the expert. You're living in your own skin. So you should be able to kind of modify and make changes to suit you.
Yeah, one of the things that as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, you raced Ironman Florida, which is an ocean swim, and you've raced Ironman Arizona, which is Tempe Town Lake, um, right? Which they're not one and the same. And
Mm-mm.
so and I've raced Ironman Florida as well myself. And so when you're going through the training for Arizona, was the swimming training any different than what you did for Florida in terms of, okay, I'm going to be in the ocean, so I need to focus on either shorter strokes or higher elbows because of the waves coming at me and stuff like that?
So the training, no, it was the same. Now the way I tend to be a pretty good open water swimmer, so I kind of adjust a little bit. We were lucky that day at Florida. We had very smooth. It was beautiful. You could see the sand under the water. It was a perfect day at Florida. But I mean, Arizona, completely different. It was 59 degrees, wetsuit mandatory. And people are with double swim caps, earplugs. Like it was, just a single loop. So that was definitely different. I think the conditions were probably the biggest difference. I wouldn't say I necessarily prepared for or swam any different, other than knowing the temperature change and
Yeah.
that making decisions based upon that, what I needed to do, because we got into T2 and can't move your hands. Therefore, you can't get dressed. So they had a warming tent because it's still, 50 degrees outside. So you have to kind of anticipate. And I had friends who had talked to me who had done cold races, and I learned, cut a blanket, put it inside my jersey. We changed into dry clothes for the bike. Like it's those things that you learn from more experienced athletes
I think
that help you in those kind of situations, I think.
Yeah, and I think people don't realize how cold Arizona in November is. I lived in Phoenix for a couple of years and it's cold. And I remember getting out of the water and to your point, like my hands were numb. And every second counts, right? To your finish time. It's like golf, every stroke counts. And I remember sitting in T1 waiting, just trying to grab socks, trying to get clothes, and I just couldn't. And I was nervous getting out on the bike because, how am I going to grab the brakes if I need to?
Mhm.
Because it was so cold. And so, yeah, I think people need to be prepared for and read blogs like yours and understand that not every race is the same. I want to pivot to the 70.3s that you mentioned earlier. You sort of buried the lead on this, where you said, I've raced 70.3s, but you didn't mention the two world qualifying races you've done. When you went into those events, were you thinking, I have a chance at qualifying for these events?
No. No. So I did my first half Ironman Chattanooga. That would have been 2021, I think. That was after COVID, right? I mean, not after, but it was after that COVID year of all the cancellations. It got deferred to the next year, which was good because, we got an extra year to prepare. And I think just getting more experience of racing under your belt. That was my husband and I's first. We weren't married at the time, but that was our first half Ironman together. And I think I I ended up qualifying. It was a surprise. They had put a lot of extra slots in because Chattanooga is it's a sellout race every year. So I think I was maybe 30th in my
Okay.
age group or something like that. And I got a roll down slot. And I remember that would have been my second half Ironman. And so I remember asking my coaches at the time, this is crazy. Should I do this? And it was enough time. It was in the fall. And they're like, if you want to do a second one this year, you can. And they're like, you never know when it's going to happen again. And it's in the US, which is also not super likely. So it was St. George.
Hmm.
And so I went there. That was my second. And that was the year of what did they call it? A bomb cyclone. I'm not saying that right, but we had a crazy storm and it was
Yeah.
that year. Hail on the bike. But it ended up it was amazing. And I was so glad I went there and raced. And then the second time I qualified, I did not go because I had a choice. We had another race I wanted to do was North Carolina 70.3, and it was a week before our wedding. And then the week after our wedding would have been the World Championships. So we're like, no, I'll be going on my honeymoon then.
Yeah.
So
Smart move. Far
yeah,
more
so
enjoyable.
it's a good lesson. You don't always have to go when
Yeah.
you qualify.
So how do you go from 2019 sprint try and you make your progressions? At what point did you say to yourself, I can do a 70.3, I'm ready to train for a 70.3? Was there something that clicked in your brain that you were like, let's do this? Or are you let's just go for it and see what happens kind of person?
No, I'm pretty methodical and I want to make sure I'm prepared for something before I sign up. So, like, I had been training for a while with people who so the training group was full of Ironman and half Ironman athletes. So, a lot of weekends I ended up doing long rides with them, anyways. And so it was more getting ready to run, a half marathon. Because before I did a 70.3, I'd only run one standalone half marathon. So, once you start getting with a group of people and you start doing those distances regularly, you're like, hey, okay, like I can do that. And I think that that's why, especially the 70.3 is such an approachable distance for people because it does take a commitment to training. But it is not the level of full that it takes. And so I think it's definitely something that's a little bit easier for people to balance. And it's fun because you're done by like like 2 o'clock and you're not out there until like midnight. But I think uh, probably the main point that shifted was after you do a half Ironman. I think this is something that happens a lot. Automatically, people, well meaning, supposedly, when are you doing an Ironman? Now, that's not something I would ever ask somebody because then they feel a little pressure too. And like I've written for Ironman, I've written for Triathlon magazine, and let me be clear, you can never do an Ironman and you're a triathlete. You can just do sprints, you can just do halves, whatever distance you want. It's very person specific, but I think there is this expectation out there from people like, well, you don't know what it's like until you do this. And I think that that's not necessary. It just puts pressure on people when um it's just not part of what I think the whole kind of welcoming environment of triathlon should be. So it's an amazing thing. And if you want to do it, that's great. But so after that, I was like, absolutely not. I will not. I want to make sure that I can do this 70.3 distance and get reasonably good at it. So I did, I think, 6 before I did my first full. And then that decision was I remember that it was on a particularly bad trail run. It was like a 10-mile trail run in Florida in the summer. I think it was 95 degrees and I'm dying. I'm like, this is really stupid. I hate this. Why am I doing this? And all of a sudden it clicked. I'm like, I can do an Ironman. I'm like, I can do this is horrible and this sucks and I'm doing it. And I'm like, I can do it. It's a completely different, energy level. It's not you're not like racing two 70.3s back to back, which I
Right.
think is what a lot of people they get that misconception. I can't do that.
Mhm.
It's not like that at all. And that was that shifting point for me was during that really bad workout. I'm like, if I can do that.
Yeah, like I love the Ironman distance because like you, I'm more of a candle than a match. Like I don't mind being out there for hours on end, but it does take a lot of time to train. And
Yeah.
I think that oftentimes people will make the leap without thinking of the amount, the volume that it's going
Hmm.
to take. And it's not because you're going to set records and qualify for championships and things like that. It just takes a lot of time. Like one of the things I often tell athletes who are interested in Ironman, I'm like, a 5 hour bike ride is literally pedaling for 5 hours, but you're probably out there for 6, 7, 8 hours because you might make a stop at a coffee shop. You might stop to get Gatorade at a gas station. Stoplights are all over the place, depending on where you live. And all of that stuff adds up. And so before you know it, you're literally your entire Saturday or Sunday is wiped out. And you have to be prepared for that. Did you get any advice, maybe from your coach or just again writing for the publications that you write for, that helped you prepare for it? And was there one piece that you were like, yeah, this is the thing I'm going to have to pay attention to the most when it comes to work life training balance?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, when I was getting ready to do my first full, I had been writing for them for about a year at the time. And, I'll pitch stories to them or they tell me specific things they want me to write. And my husband was like, hey, you need to, tell them what if you write a series of like 6 posts about what it's like leading up to your first full Ironman. And I'm like, they're not going to want that. Like, I'm an age grouper. Why? It's my first. Why are they going to care? And he's like, people have so many questions leading up because it's an unknown, right? So he's like, just ask. And they were like, yes, definitely, let's do it. So I did that 6 part blog for them. And during that period in time, every month, I would talk about what we were doing in training. And I would also I'd talk to either pro athletes or fellow age groupers or coaches and get their information about tips and suggestions. And so we talked about like training in the summer at trying to modify when it gets to be 105 degrees and you're trying to get training in it, balancing training with life and recovery modalities and all this kind of stuff. We talked about taper, and I think one of my favorite ones was towards the end, and it was all on mindset and mental skills. And I knew that was going to be a big thing for me because leading up to Ironman Florida, my longest run was a 20-mile run. I had not run a marathon, so it was going to be my first marathon and my first Ironman at the same time. So I knew, if anything else, I knew I could knock out the swim. Good, I can knock out a century. I'm fine. The run was going to be the thing where I was going to need that, and that is, I know people like to say, not an Ironman is 90% mental and 10% physical. I'm going to dispute those a little bit.
Hot take coming
However,
in.
however, I think that the importance of that, being able to like have the strength to stay focused and to like not fall into what if thinking and not catastrophize and be able to like when an obstacle happens. I remember a friend told me that. He's like, it's a long day. So if something goes wrong, you fix it then. It's not like you're worrying about seconds, you're worrying about sustaining over hours. So you fix problems and obstacles when they happen. And I had things happen. I got stung on the leg by a wasp riding at a T2. You get weird things that go
Mhm.
wrong. People get flats, they drop a bottle, and you have to learn how to be resilient. And that was the mindset part was the biggest thing for me. And I don't think a lot of people realize until they get in there and they start doing it that maybe they wish they would have spent a little more time on that, the mental side of training.
When I was training and racing for Ironman, one of my training partners, we used to always say the hardest muscle to train is the one that lies in the 6 inches between your ears. Because look, it's 100+ degrees, it's humid, right? You've been out on the bike for 4 or 5 hours and you're wondering why does that fire hydrant that you just want to reach keep moving further and further away from you? And but you work at it and you get there because it is a series of problem solving, right? Here's an issue, solve the problem. Here's an issue, solve the problem, and keep moving forward. Which makes me wonder about your training. Has there been a moment where you vividly remember everything lining up? This is during training, not in the race, during training, where you're like, I could do this all day long, whether it was in the water, on the bike, or on the run.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember those moments because they don't happen all the time. And so I tell my husband, like the other day, he had a killer bike workout. We looked at it ahead of time. I'm like, oh, buddy, this looks fun. And he did it, and he was like, I felt really great, and that was good. And I'm like, no, wait a second. I'm like, you crushed it. It was amazing. And I think sometimes, not a gender thing. Sometimes men tend to do downplay a little bit, and so I'm like, okay, I need you to recognize how good that was, what it felt like, realize you did a great job. You were able to execute and remember that because that's not going to happen every time. So you have to remember, draw upon those times in training, like you said, whether you're swimming or running or whatever, and everything clicks. And you're like, oh, so what I do is I'll write comments in my training peaks, but also I was reading a blog the other day and the gentleman suggested this, having a written journal. And he was calling it like your confidence book. Just writing like 2 sentences. Had a 8-mile run today, had intervals at the end, executed them perfectly, felt really strong. And so you get all these little entries, and then that week of the race, you go back and read them, and you just remind yourself, we forget so quickly, right? Just remind yourself, these are all the times I did so great. Because a lot of times what happens is those times we didn't do great,
Mhm.
they stand out a little bit more. So just to give yourself, it's kind of like putting like pennies in like a little confidence bank, and then you withdraw before the race. And so I really liked that idea. I thought that was a good way to.
That that's a fantastic idea, and I think one of the things that I've been known to say is if you're writing things down, you tend to remember them more,
Mhm.
as opposed to thinking to yourself, "Oh, that was a great run, and I'll remember that later on." Like that
Yeah.
almost never happens, but writing it down reinforces that it was a great swim, bike, or run. Um, which brings me to the next question. Like, we live in a world where obviously social media is very prevalent. And if we aren't taking note of the things that we've done, like writing the note, 8-mile progressive run, it was fantastic. And we open up whatever platform you love and you see Jane Smith or Joe Smith crushing, for those of you who are listening, I put it in air quotes, crushing their workout, you tend to think to yourself, I'm not doing enough. So, for you personally, how do you manage the whole comparison game between social media plus you're interviewing elites and pros
Mhm.
and age groupers as well who are going to tell you about all the good things that are happening? Very rarely are going to be like, well, I went on this 10-mile run and I bonked at mile 4 and went home, right? That
Yeah.
almost probably never happens. And so, how do you manage to either compartmentalize that, or how do you work that into your training so that you don't fall prey to the comparison trap?
Yeah, so I think social media can be a tricky thing, and I do have a little background working in some social media management, so I've seen kind of the backside of it that isn't so great. Um, but I I use it for, my blog, and I'm a photographer too, so I like to share photos a lot, and I have found myself, just over the last couple years, I like to share, things that I've done, distances, maybe helpful tidbits I think will help people, but I kind of starting to refrain from sharing paces so much. And it's kind of it's an intentional thing because I've had friends tell me before they'll see like a swim and they'll see my pace and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're swimming! I can't swim that fast." And I'm like, that's not the point. Like, it's not. I don't want to be a helping to, compare. And I mean, I think it's human nature, right? I'm going to go to a running race and I'm going to be like, yeah, there's absolutely no way I'm anywhere near any of these people. Um, but I think a lot of good can come from social media if people need community and accountability. But then I think also, if it gets to a point where you are starting to change the intention of your workouts, you're modifying workouts, you're working out when you're injured, you're all these that you're starting to do different things differently in real life because of online life. Real life is reality. Social media is online life. It is a reflection of reality. Therefore, it's subjective. It's what people choose to put out there. And I think that's an important thing to realize. Actually, I wrote about that on the blog. We did a piece on, there was a recent study about the impact of Strava on runners, and it listed all these different things that runners would say kind of about how it was helping them stay motivated and providing community. And there were a lot of people who did say, sometimes I'll add on a couple extra miles just because it looks better. I want to title my easy, I don't want to show my easy runs. There are things like that, and I think that's where it can be damaging. I mean, it's something that we all have to navigate because unfortunately that is part of life, but you also get to choose, right? So I don't have Strava anymore. I just don't see
Yeah.
value in it for me. And I think there is for other people. I don't really care to look at other people's stats, and I don't really see why they would care to look at mine. So it's about, you do get to choose where
It's
you put your energy.
It is super interesting that you say that because for a long time I was on Strava and I got off of it for a number of years. And it's not like I wasn't missing anything. Like the whole misnomer, right? If it's not on Strava, it didn't happen. I was like, yeah, I'm still fit and I'm still crossing finish line. So yeah, it's actually happening. And then I just got back on it a few months ago because of the company for Run Try Bike. We have a club page there. And so I got back on it. But I'm one of those people that goes on there, changes his description to, ran for donuts today and then, gets off and doesn't scroll everybody
Mhm.
else's. But I vividly remember this when I used Strava the first time. People would title their stuff Easy Run, or a specific person, I should say, not people, a specific person would title it Easy Run, and everything. I mean, every second of the run was in zone 4 or 5. And I'm thinking to myself, there's not a single part of this that was easy. And it happened for months. And then
Mm.
come Ironman race day, they burned out, they fizzled out, and they bonked because everything was done at such a high intensity and trying to impress, Tammy in Tallahassee instead of worrying about themselves. And so I applaud you for saying Strava's not for me. Like it's just not something I need to be a part of, and I can control what I see and don't see in that way. I think that's an important message for people. Um, that being said, your blog is going to have stories, and it's going to be a scenario in which people are reading it and they start to compare stuff. So, what else is on there besides your story? What else is on Triple Threat Life?
So actually, I tried to work to include more of myself in there because there isn't a lot of my own story on there. It's primarily, I kind of describe it as like it is a triathlon resource from a best friend perspective, right? So it is about taking information that I've either learned or through experts that I've interviewed or through my own coaches, some of my own experiences, but it's kind of about teaching. And so passing on information I think is important in triathlon. When I started, I learned a lot from fellow athletes. And there are some great publications out there that you can learn from, but I think that this is it's a more personal outlet. So we cover really anything related to, we talk about mindset skills. The other day there was a post about how to pack gear bags for an Ironman race, how to do a split transition, how to, or what to do and what not to do with drafting in a race. So we cover all of those things that maybe people haven't been taught and they don't necessarily know. But there are a lot of people who will choose to do these type of races, and the preparation factor isn't necessarily there. You realize when you get there and you're like, oh, well, did you read the athlete guide? Did you know that there's penalties? Like learning about aid stations and how to go through them. So it's an informational thing a lot. And I do have some of my pro athlete friends will come on. We just talked to Matthew Marquardt a couple weeks ago, and I think he's really cool because we're talking about balancing triathlon training and life. So we're not
Mhm.
talking necessarily about how much he's training and his impressive metrics. We do cover a little bit about that. But what I want to learn from these, I talked to you about this before, it's about the what and the how and not necessarily the who. So they are elite athletes. And I think there's a lot we can learn from what they do and what they don't do than necessarily what wetsuit they're using or what bike they're riding. That stuff is important too. But to really look at how they approach training, and he's in medical school and he's an elite triathlete. So he knows a lot about how to balance everything. So that's what we talked about with him. And I think, that is any way that we can provide value for age groupers in kind of a more conversational environment instead of just reading on a website. I think is just that's kind of the goal, hopefully.
What's a topic that that you write about that you absolutely love? You're like, I want to just keep talking to people about X. What's X?
Mindset skills. So I think I probably could have been like a sports psychologist. I love talking about how to avoid what if thinking, like how to set goals like you will actually achieve, um and how to mentally prepare, like to be focused. And just because I write about these things, that doesn't mean that I'm an expert and I get it right 100% of the time. I'm honest. So, and I explain my experiences, and I think that also helps people relate to you because it's like, okay, I struggle with focusing, especially during the run. These are 6 things that I have found that help me. So maybe they'll help you. It's kind of that type of thing. And that is definitely I could write about mindset skills all the time. I love that kind of stuff.
I'm with you. That's one of my favorite topics. We have a number of sports psychologists and therapists that write for us, and that's the content that I am gobbling up constantly. I just find it fascinating. But I appreciate you pointing this out because I think it gets lost in translation oftentimes, which is I love writing about mindset or I love writing about X or Y. That doesn't mean that I'm an absolute expert and I get it 100% correct 100% of the time. And I was thinking about this question when we were talking about talking to elites and pro triathletes. I was wondering, what's an assumption that we as the age grouper make about the elite or the pro that they've told you, like, that's just not the way this stuff works. Like, that's not true at all.
Yeah, great question. There's a couple things that come to mind. One of them was I had pitched to Triathlete magazine earlier, let's see, last year. I wanted to talk to Emma Palin Brown. She had had the period in time where she had had those episodes where she kind of, just completely fell apart on the run at one of the T100 races. And she talked about on media how it was so challenging. And then I believe she had like a bike situation before a race. She had all these things that went wrong. And she came back. She won. I mean, she won all these races in a row. And so I'm like, I want to talk to her about overcoming adversity, how you go through those low periods in time and what you focus on to really be able to propel you forward. And she's a super positive person. So we talked about how, like a step back it can be like 2 steps forward. So you have to keep thinking about, yeah, you got to take necessary time to recover and rehabilitate. You have to figure out what went wrong so you can fix it. But also you have to keep pushing forward and believe that you can. You can do something and you can achieve it and you can't get too down on yourself because we are doing a sport. I mean, for them, it is their livelihood. So it's a little bit differently, or I'm a little bit different than age groupers. But I was talking to her about how she struggles with imposter syndrome. She had said, she's like, you guys, work full-time jobs and you go to all these races. And she's like, this is, what they do for work. She's like, I line up in the start line. I think there was one of the Olympians said the exact same thing. He said, he's like, I line up there and I'm looking around at all these people and I'm like, why am I even here? I'm not as good as them. I'm not as fast as them. And I've had a lot of pro triathletes say that to me. And I think that that is something people would not necessarily think because they just think that they're I don't know. They are a certain level above us with physical talent, but they are still human beings and they still have struggles. They have some of the same mental roadblocks we do. They make mistakes, as you've seen in some of the, most recent races. So they go through some of the same things that we do. And I think it's important to remember that. And you can learn from that too, I think, because they have a bigger platform to share those. And I like that a lot of them are honest now and will share about struggles and we can take that information and use it.
Yeah. So for you, is I was going to ask, is that something that when you're out there, or maybe when you're at your own start line and you look around, you think to yourself, well, this Olympian had imposter syndrome and they managed to, get themselves in the water, onto the bike, and across the finish line after the run. Does that give you some semblance of confidence when you're standing there wondering, do I belong here?
I really tend to be kind of laser focused when I get up to the start line. So I'm thinking about what I want to do next and what I want to do next. So I might think about those things, 24 hours in advance, but not necessarily right before. I think it happens for me a lot of times in actual workouts. I remember one time, Haley Chura had told me that no matter what, she won't let anyone sabotage her long run. That means she will run it as easy as she needs to run it with no perceptions about pace. She won't let anyone, whether it's social media or otherwise, she's like, I'm going to do what I need to do in order to set myself up for success. And I think that that is something I still, those little tidbits, things that people say, I'm out on my long run and I'm thinking, why is this so slow? And I'm like, no, it's easy. And you think about, so little things will pop into my head if I did an interview. I'm like, okay,
That is a great reframing, right? This is
yeah,
not slow, this is easy. Like, that's a
yeah.
great reframing to get yourself through that process and to the finish line. Why do you think that we as age groupers, and I'm going to generalize this and I'm stereotyping all of us because I get it, some of us don't do this, but why do you think that we as age groupers tend to focus so much on those metrics and those numbers? And we use the words like that was slow instead of that was easy, when the pros whose checks, right, depend on running easy are capable of doing it. Is it experience in the sport? Is it, hey, this is for my paycheck, so I have to make sure that I'm physically ready and mentally ready to compete on race day? Like, what do you think the difference between the age grouper and the elite slash pro is when it comes to that kind of stuff?
It's a good question. I'm not sure, honestly. I completely know the answer. I would suspect that because of just the sheer amount of volume that they do, they're much better at being in tune with their bodies than we are, I think, and the experience level plays into that because a lot of them were athletes in another sport before they became triathletes, and at least they did one. They were swimmers or cyclists or whatever. Um, I think a lot of us, we like a lot of us are adult onset swimmers. We didn't learn how to swim until, and so there is that part of it. Also, I think you have a small subset of professional athletes, and they are the upper tier. They're the upper echelon, right? You have thousands upon thousands of age
Yeah.
groupers. And so I think it's a little bit easier to, you get into that comparison trap easily when people are like, just my sub 4.5 hour half Ironman or whatever. And then you start looking at your times. And I think it's a little easier to do that because for a professional athlete, they are not necessarily going into a race saying, this is what I need to hold my target power for. This is what my heart rate needs to be. I want this, whatever, 120 half marathon or whatever. They need to win the race.
Right.
That's what they're thinking about. And so racing becomes a little bit of a different dynamic for age groupers than it is for pros. Whereas they might have a goal that they want. The end goal is ultimately they need to win or place as high as they can. So the comparison to that, when they look at, oh, well, what's his name is running this in his workouts, it doesn't really matter because when it gets to race day, they need to run whatever they need to run in order to run faster than that person. So I think that may be where some of it comes in, but that doesn't mean that they don't feel that too, because I'm sure that a lot of them look at stuff and they compare, just like it's a human thing, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And all the years I've been doing this stuff since 2007, we've run this company since 2020. I think that's the best answer I've heard to that question, which is they just have to be faster than their competitor on that day. They don't have to be faster than their competitor, 3 months in advance while they're doing a long, easy run and their competitor is doing, 400-meter intervals. Like, you're comparing apples to oranges in that
Yeah.
scenario. And, as long as you're ahead of that person on race day, that's really all that matters. And that's a great answer. And again, I don't think I've heard it put that way in all the years that we've been doing this stuff.
Good. There was one something my old horse trainer used to say, and this cracked me up because I'm like, yeah, it's stupid. But he's like, You don't have to be the best. You just have to be better than the rest. Was what he used to say, and I think about that. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that there's a kernel of truth to that.
Right? It's like when you're like when people ask me about because I'm a trail runner, ultra runner, and they're like, "Well, what happens if a bear comes?" I'm like, "I just have to be faster than the slowest
Yeah,
person. If that happens, I'm good." We're running out of time here a little bit, so I wanna ask you a fun question that I thought about. So, on the Mount Rushmore of your races, I want to know the best swim, the best bike, the best run, and the best finish line experience.
okay, so I can tell you probably the best swim. I loved Ironman Florida. Just swimming out, it was calm, it was clear, doesn't always happen. I could see the sand. I even saw little fish, jellyfish. It was amazing. Um, the best bike in a race. Actually, I I had a really good bike at an Olympic like a month ago. So
Yeah.
that's the most recent in my memory. I had the highest power I've had on a hilly bike course, which is challenging for me. And that's my one that sticks out in my memory. And then the run, it's definitely North Carolina. It was the week before our wedding. The weather was perfect, and that's my PR still. And that was 2022. And that just I mean, coming from Florida, being in like 90-degree heat and going up there, and I think it was like 70, no humidity, and I was like, this is what running is supposed to feel like.
What about the best finish line?
Oh, I think it probably has to be my first bowl, the
First of all,
Florida.
at
You come
Florida.
down and it's the sun. I think a lot of people don't realize that the sun sets earlier over there because it's Panama
Super
City.
early.
So I think I finished around 8:20, something like that. So the sun had been down for like, a little while, and it's Christmas time over there because it's November. So Christmas lights and all the palm trees, and it's dark and just heading towards that the the big Ferris wheel there. And my husband had surprised me because I do some press. So he was able to get in the finish line and give me my medal. And I was so delirious. I'm like, what? How are you here? I'm like, and the funniest thing, I had no idea about the first timer's bell. And I was so ready, like probably the last half mile was my fastest of the entire race. He's like, why were you sprinting across the line? I'm like, I don't know. I just got so excited. And I'm like, I want to be done. I just like sprinted. He's like, come back. Oh, but that was probably the most fun.
That run, because it does get dark and you're in that
Yeah.
neighborhood and it's not uber well lit in that
No,
neighborhood, right? Did you guys have a house that had a chalkboard up with college football game scores?
No, we actually had a TV. There was a
Okay.
guy with TV, and he had shifted it so as you're running by, you would see the college football scores. It's a crazy place. There were people driving by on golf course,
Yes.
garts playing crazy music, people at bars. It's a rowdy run course, but
It really
yeah,
is. It's a memorable run course for me because of all of that stuff. Like, it's just different in
yeah.
every step of the way
It's Panama
along.
City.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
anything goes. Yeah.
I love it. So you've got two 70.3s on the schedule coming up. What's the future after that look like for you? Are you the kind of person who's like, I'm going to be in triathlon from here on out? Will you get back onto the trails, the ones that pushed you off and into Ironman?
Um, I want to keep getting better at racing. I think that it takes a long time. I like to say, "Oh, I've done this and I've done this," and then I remember my coach is like, "You're like a baby triathlete," like compared to someone who's been doing this for 30 years. So I want to continue to get better, and I'm shooting for. I want a really good run off the bike and a half. My goals tend to surround running. Unfortunately, Arizona was not a good experience for me. And so had a lot of trouble with nutrition on the run. So that it ended not well. So I will do another Ironman. I'm not sure what year it will be. But I know I can put down a really good marathon off the bike. I didn't get it this time. But I think that's part of like, you know, no matter where you place, or it doesn't necessarily matter, that is dependent upon who gets there, right? And even times are dependent upon the course and the weather and your training and whatnot. But I think always continuing to strive. What I say in the blog is like continual pursuit of like personal improvement. Just getting a little bit better. So that's the goal, just to continue getting a little bit better
Would you
and
describe
help people
100%? Would you describe yourself as a patient person?
in certain areas. I am patient with other people and I'm really good at explaining things, and then I'm not so great at doing it for myself.
That's interesting
So,
because the idea that I had a bad run at Arizona and I don't know when the next Ironman race will be is a sign of patience, right? Like I
yep.
will get there
Yeah.
eventually. I don't need to do it right away. That's a tremendous sign of patience because you also said, um, I want to be in this. I want to improve. I want to get better. And it wasn't in a way that said, I'm going to do it overnight, right? Because
Yeah.
this stuff is hard. This stuff is really hard. And improvement doesn't happen, from day to day. It takes months,
Yeah.
years in some cases
Years.
to get better. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I told someone the other day because I tend to be a little better at swimming than the other two, and so some of my friends, that is an area a lot of people struggle with. So they'll say, "You know, how did you get better at swimming? When did the confidence shift happen?" And honestly, I've been swimming for like 4 years before I actually felt I'm getting good at this to where I'm like I'm happy with what I'm doing, and it just takes that long, like especially in endurance sports. I'm sure it's the same like with doing those long like ultra trail marathon. It doesn't happen in months or years, and I think part of being patient is important for any athlete, but because you can try to take shortcuts and quick fixes, and they might work for a short period of time, and it's not a sustainable thing. Just consistency, and sometimes you have to make changes when things aren't responding the way that you think they will, so you have to like adapt. But I think just consistency and continuing to work on just getting a little bit better all the time is something anyone can do.
Yeah. I tell people you have to get comfortable with doing the boring work, right?
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
when you get comfortable doing the boring work is when you start to see the bells and whistles take place because
Mhm.
all of a sudden, and let's make up a number, your 10-minute mile goes to 9:58, then it goes to
Yeah.
9:50 and then 9:42. And it's all because you're doing the boring work on a
Mhm.
consistent basis. Because again, social media will have a tendency to trick us into believing that everybody's, doing 400-meter repeats and 800-meter repeats, and they're going from,
Yeah.
10-minute miles to 5-minute miles and qualifying for the Olympics. And it's like, that's just not how any of this works. Just show up, do the boring work day in, day out, and you will see that improvement and you'll become the overnight success.
Yeah, yeah. There was a great commercial on the Olympics, and it was about, three examples of celebrities and athletes. And I don't even remember what the commercial was for, but I just remember it was about these are your overnight successes. And it shows them little kids, and it's you only see that. You see the end product. You don't see what has taken so long in order to achieve. So
Yeah.
definitely true.
Muhammad Ali, who is an idol of my father's, and I was able to watch him fight oftentimes, and he always was great with quotes. One of the things he was quoted as saying is, "Champions are made in the dark," and it's the things that he's doing that you don't see that
Hmm.
are the things that are the difference, right? Because the press would come in and they'd see him spar for a round or two, and
Hmm.
walk away, and it's like, yeah, once you guys walk away, I'm still doing work, and that's where the champion gets made. So
Yep.
that quote is fantastic. It's forever etched in my brain. Brittany, we are running out of time. Where can people find you so that they can read your great work, follow your journey to your 370.3s, and hopefully a slot at another world championship at some point?
So I have a new website, and so the blog is Triple Threat Life. Obviously, some bike run, but it's about being a triple threat in any area of your life because I talk about mindset too. I think we can all do that. So it's thetriplethreatlife.com. And then for people who are on Substack, it's triplethreatlife.substack.com. So we send out newsletters twice a week. And then the Instagram is Triple Threat Life and TikTok. So it's Triple Threat Life everywhere. But yeah, they can sign up for the newsletter and get things delivered right to their inbox so you don't have to scroll through, media endlessly trying to find things.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. I'll make sure we put that into the show notes. I really appreciate your time, Brittany. Have a
Of
great rest of
course.
your day.
Thank you. It was awesome.
For those of you who stuck with us throughout this Running Tales, I hope you were able to enjoy it despite Craig Lewis not being here today and having to listen to a person who never uses the words mate or flat or have a British accent. Really appreciate you being here. 2 weeks from now, we will have another Running Tales for you where Craig will be the host. So make sure you check us out on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network on your favorite podcast platforms. Be sure to smash the subscribe button to Brittany's Triple Threat Life Substack, as well as on our Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. Have a great rest of your day.